All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Todd Brous. I'm your host for the evening. I'm here with Susan Schultz and Ashley Wilson, and we would like to welcome everyone to HBAP Startups. So let's get started. For those of you who are new to the Startups group, we have a few announcements that we do at the beginning of each meeting. We will do some short networking breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together for our main event. First off is our mission. We're here to help foster and fortify an innovation and entrepreneur community coming out of the Harvard Business Analytics program. Our goal is to provide our members with the tools, knowledge, leadership, and confidence necessary to create and grow their businesses from the ground up. Susan.
And there are so many ways to get and stay in touch with us. So our website, the YouTube site, where all of the presenters' recordings are set up, as long as they've given us permission to put them up there. We have a newsletter. All of these links are in the chat right now. If you are in or have been in HBAP, we also have a Slack channel. And then, as always, bring a guest. And or if you've got a topic that you want to cover, or you've got a speaker that you think would love to come and talk to us, or you would love to have come to talk to us, let us know. And then, of course, recordings are posted publicly on YouTube, so just be mindful of that in what we say and how we talk. So we've got a few things coming up, and then a lot of things in the works. So on March 26th, Todd is going to do another session on agentic AI. Yay. And then Nick on April 16th is going to talk about this really interesting combination that he's done from two different parts of his career, is looking at oratory mastery and then tying in analytics. And then we've also got still to be scheduled the workshop following up from the customer discovery presentation that we did a few weeks ago, because enough of you said you'd really like a workshop where you get to practice what we talked about there. And then more to come. And then our code of conduct, just a reminder, right? This is a safe place and a fun place where we really talk about different things and a sense of collaboration and confidentiality and trust. So just a reminder that all rights are reserved by the presenter. And then about our feedback, I just read this really cool article that said, actually, constructive criticism, as we call it, is not good for the presenter ever. So it puts them in a defensive mindset. And why do that? If you want to actually share wisdom and give them feedback that will help them get better. So our philosophy is the Francis Fry's 5-to-0 ratio now, which is just all positive feedback that works the best for people. And then always a reminder, no personal recordings of these sessions. And then if you've got an idea or a conflict of interest, or you just want to chat, let us know. We're happy to help you work on something or solve something.
All right, so thanks, Susan. Let's do some social networking breakout rooms. I think I got this set up correctly. I will see everyone in about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I hope everybody had a good time in your breakout rooms. So just as a little announcement, a reminder before you leave this evening, there'll be a little pop-up window, a web browser with a little survey. Please do fill out that survey. Filling out surveys saves lives. We're data analytics people. Data makes us happy. So, and also it will give you a great complexion when you fill out a survey. So please do that. We would definitely appreciate that feedback. Also, after we're done, please do stick around for some overtime. The conversation will go on for a while. And then just as a little reminder, tonight is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. Okay, now it is my honor to introduce tonight's guest speaker, Mike Salguero. Mike has been in the forefront of the claims-based meat movement since founding ButcherBox in 2015, when he discovered that 100% grass-fed beef was extremely hard to find in the United States. If you haven't heard of ButcherBox, they send out a monthly box of curated meats from the best small farms across the United States. Mike built ButcherBox into the leading direct-to-consumer meat brand by making high-quality meat more accessible to everyone. and while putting an emphasis on animal welfare, the environment, and supporting farmers and fishermen. ButcherBox is a B Corporation certified, signaling that the brand's commitment to using its business as a force for good. And what might surprise most of the folks here is that ButcherBox is entirely bootstrapped and privately owned. He's got full control over his company, which is my favorite kind of story. And in 2020, Mike was an Entrepreneur of the Year National Award winner by Ernst Young. He holds an M.B.A. in entrepreneurship from Babson College, and he lives in Cambridge with his wife and 3 daughters. And now, without further ado, as is our custom here at HBAP Startups, if we could all please briefly unmute ourselves, and let's give a warm round of applause to Mike Salguero.
Welcome.
Mike,
Welcome.
thank you for joining us. This is such a treat. I'm going to just spotlight the 2 of us, and so we can get started. So I guess I've got so many questions to ask you, and I would love to start with, tell us about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to get myself off the camera. All right, hold on. I just need to hide myself, or I'm just going to get very distracted.
No worries.
Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm super happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. I had taught a class recently at HBS, and Kelly heard me talk, and he said, you've got to come in front of this group so you can talk about entrepreneurship, your path, bootstrapping, and how I've done things differently. And I would like to say I have a strong point of view. I don't mind having people push back on me. So I know that in the intro, it was like, don't give negative feedback. But if you want to give me negative feedback, that's okay. I can handle it. And I'm a wide open book. So you can really ask me anything. This is recorded, so I might say no, but I usually don't. So yeah, so I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up, I was born in Paraguay. I was the youngest of 4. My parents got divorced when I was 4 months old, and I moved to the United States. Grew up in a very small town in Western Massachusetts. Had a paper route by the age of 10. And I had a grandfather and an uncle who were entrepreneurial, and I thought that seemed pretty cool and wanted to follow a similar path. As when I got to college, I started working. I went to college in Boston. I started working full time. So I was like, started like scrapping together, making money and being entrepreneurial. Got out of school, worked in real estate for a bit. I made this political t-shirt that was fairly successful and realized like that's a lot more fun than working for someone. And that really started the journey. And then I went and worked at a real estate development office for 3 years. And then I started my first company. My first company was called custommade.com. I started it with my best friend in 2008, right as the economy was collapsing. And custommade.com was a marketplace for custom stuff. So we connected makers, as we call them. So basically people who make jewelry and furniture. We were connecting them with consumers. We bought a website that had been in existence since 1996. And the thesis was, we thought of it as like a real estate play. It was like, we called it a shack in Manhattan. It was this website that looked awful, but got so much inbound traffic from Google, because at the time, the algorithm, if you typed in custom anything, it was going to custommade.com. And so it had all this traffic, but it wasn't being monetized. We took that over. We spent about 3 years running it ourselves, my co-founder and I, and had some employees, some salespeople. It was super fun. We were like learning a lot. We were young. I was 26 when I started it. And then we decided that we should go raise venture capital. Why? Well, if you're in technology for long enough, it's like venture capital is everywhere. I'm sure you've learned this at HBS as well. It's like, who comes and talks to you? Venture capitalists. Who's all over the tech news? Venture capital. Like who's talked about, like who gets the articles? It's all venture capital, venture capital, venture capital. And so as an entrepreneur, you start to believe the lie, which is the lie that you have to raise money in order to run a successful company. And that is what we fell for. We were like, everyone's raising money. We should raise money. And so we went out and raised money. My co-founder and I were relentless and good salespeople. So that's what we had going for us. The business model wasn't that great, but we weren't going to stop until somebody said yes. We did about 70 venture capital interviews or pitches, I suppose. I think we got in front of 8 full partner meetings, which is like somebody likes you, then they bring you in on the Monday for the full partner meeting, which is like where they're going to say yes to you. Uh, all but one of those said no. And then we were in a boardroom and we had built this feature because the number one we were a sales organization. We were just like calling makers and trying to get them to sign up for a subscription. And we built this feature where they could see jobs coming in because the number one question was like, well, how do I know there are any jobs on that platform? And so we built this like jobs board, which was like a classified ads. We're in a meeting and I'd like pull up the job board and we have this job board up and you can see all these jobs and they're coming in. They're like coming in. And I was like, all we have to do is stand in between those transactions and we'll be the largest marketplace for custom stuff. This is 2011. As soon as I said the word marketplace, everyone wanted to be involved in our deal. So this was the era of Airbnb and Uber and marketplaces were really hot. And if you're gonna go raise venture, figure out what the word is. Like right now it's AI, although that's probably gone, so it's something else. But like whatever the word is, like just make sure your thing has that because it makes raising money a lot easier. So it went from everyone saying no to like all of a sudden everyone wanted to be involved in our deal. So we raised 1.9 million. 6 months later, we raised 4 million. And then a year later, we raised 18 million. So we raised a whole bunch of venture capital and it did not go well. I like to tell a few stories of my experience raising venture, but my number one regret is Google was one of our investors, Google Ventures, a great investor. And Google had this whole model where they would like help you out with all the Google services. So like if you're having struggles with your AdWords account, it's like here's the person who created AdWords, they'll help you. Literally. And you're like, okay, great. Like, what am I doing wrong? And then they're like, here's some gift cards. Just keep spending on our platform. It was like amazing. They're like, do you want us to look at your technology? And we're like, of course, yeah, come on in. Take a look under the hood. They came in and they were like, this is the worst technology we've ever seen. And you have to fire everybody, basically. So our partner at Google was like, hey, bad news, guys. Like you gotta let everyone go because like you're like this technology isn't gonna scale. We didn't have product market fit. And so now we're like, so what did we do? We like basically brought in this person who had quote unquote done it before, scaled like AOL back in the day, had no business being at a small tech company trying to find product market fit. And over the course of a year, we basically went department by department, letting go of all of the people who had helped us get to that spot, and bringing in the quote unquote professionals, all basically forced by our VCs. And now we didn't actually get forced, like they didn't have like the legal right, but even if they don't have the legal right, they have ways of really coercing you to do what they want. And so it turned out really poorly. We ended up going under in 2015. We actually got foreclosed on because we took some venture debt and then our bank account went below that. Before that, we had tried to sell the company, find a new CEO. We had replaced every single department except for my department. And I have this memory. This is like my memory of raising venture is I'm in my car outside of the office and I can't get out of my car. And I'm like, I don't want to go into work today. I just can't face the people in there. And it was mainly because I had replaced all of my friends. I had replaced all of the people who had like, done the early part where you're hacking through the jungle, trying to figure out a path. And like all of those people had been replaced. And I was left with like no friends, no prospects. It was grim. It was grim. Uh, and in the last year that we were running, my daughter was born. My co-founder called me and said he actually called me while I was in the hospital, which was nice of him. And he said, I feel like it's the fourth quarter and I've never been the starting quarterback, so I want to be the CEO. And I was like, okay. I was just like holding my little newborn. I was like, great, cool. So he became the CEO and I got bored. And so while the company was falling apart, I knew that like more of my time in this thing was just not going to work. It was like clearly not going to work. And started looking or figuring out, trying to decide what I was going to do next. And I decided I was going to take some time off and build a hobby. And the hobby was that my wife and I had been looking for grass-fed beef because we were following these elimination diets online. And my wife has a thyroid condition, and a lot of these elimination diets to like eliminate inflammatory foods, they'll say eat grass-fed beef, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. We tried to find it, we couldn't find it, and I was like, where do you find this stuff? And I just kind of got obsessed with like finding grass-fed beef. And one thing led to another. I started a Kickstarter, and that started the ButcherBox journey. I took the weekend off in between the two companies, and yeah, so I've been running a company for like 18 years now, which is and I've done it both ways. I did it the venture capital way, and now I've done it the bootstrap way. We basically built a hobby business, and yeah, despite the fact we'll probably do about 580 million this year, it still feels like a hobby. And that makes me very proud to say, because it's hard to do as you get bigger, it's hard to do as you start, and saying no to venture capital is a viable path, and I would argue, and happy to argue, a much better path.
Much better path. So that's a fantastic story there. Just off the top of my head, like how did you convince your first suppliers and partners to move forward with you, or was that a challenge?
Yeah, well, okay, so when I decided I was going to go do something after my first company, Custom Made, I decided that rather than like try to do one thing, I was going to try to do three things, and I was going to see which of them like worked. And so I had a whiteboard. I took this from like the Lean Startup Canvas. I
Perfect.
had a whiteboard and I had three different business ideas. I had a billboard idea. We were going to like take digital billboards and create remnant space and then sell remnant space. A bond idea. We were going to try to, there's like, I forget the number. It's like there's $26 billion worth of those paper bonds that some people used to get as kids that are uncashed, that like are just sitting out there. And it was going to be like cash for gold. Like, anyway, I still think that idea is great. And then
It's a
there's
good idea.
it's a good idea. And for a whole host of reasons, it like wasn't gonna work. So every week I would be like, what's the kill shot? Like, what's the one thing that will prevent this from happening? So in the case of the billboard, it was like all of the digital billboards were being run by one company. Like one company made the physical billboards. So if they didn't want to play game, like it wasn't going to work. So it was like, I wonder if I can reach out to the CTO and see if they're interested in playing. The bond thing was like a legal thing. It's like, how can you actually be able to cash these bonds? Because you have to be like a power of attorney or a bank, and it's just um. And then ButcherBox, it was like, where do you source this stuff? And more importantly, how do you ship frozen? Like, how do you ship a box of meat in pre-portioned steaks that shows up on someone's doorstep perfectly so that they like it's as if they went to the grocery store? And when I would look around in 2015 at the different companies, like you could buy grass-fed beef online, but as soon as you got to the shipping page, it was like $100 in shipping. And so I just felt like, okay, nobody's like kind of figured out how to make this a thing. Um, and so I basically killed it a few times because I'm like, I can't figure out how to do this. And then I would always like go on LinkedIn and just like go on LinkedIn and look around. And I found the former head of operations of Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks is like a 600 million direct to consumer steak company. I found him. I reached out on LinkedIn, and he's like, "My non-compete just ended. I would love to help you." And he made an introduction to one place in Wisconsin that cut meat and shipped meat. And that's all they did. And in exchange for some equity, which ended up being very expensive, we've now bought him out, but it was far more expensive than probably raising money would have been. But in exchange for some equity, he made the introductions. Now, I do think obviously, like I had been running a Google Ventures company for 8 or 9 years, right? So I certainly had something to lean on when I'm like, hey, I've done this before. I'm going to come into this space. So I wasn't like necessarily, brand new, but yeah, that company was willing to take a risk on me because they weren't doing very well at the time. And it was a good risk for them to take because we pushed a lot of meat through there for about 5 years before we moved on to other vendors and whatnot.
So you gave that guru from Omaha Steaks equity. Why did that not work out, or was it just not the
Well,
value?
so the big problem I made in this company is valuation.
Oh,
So I had just raised like $10 million on a $40 million valuation. And when I started ButcherBox, I was like, I don't know, I was pretty depressed at how much we had failed, and I also didn't think the company was going to be a big thing. So this guy was like, I can make all these introductions, I can get all the specs, find all the farms, I can get you fully loaded so you're ready to go. And it's going to cost $75,000. And I was trying to start ButcherBox for under $10,000. That was the plan. And I'm like, God, that's way too much. Can I pay you in stock? He's like, yeah, sure, I'll take stock. And so I was like, okay, the company's probably worth like $750,000. So here's 10% of the company. That turned out to be pretty expensive. And so we bought him out. I think like 3 years later, we bought him out, and it was he got $200,000 a month for 2 years. So
wow. So looking back on that, would you consider that a mistake? Uh,
I, I I mean, it was a lot of money. The mistake was the valuation.
okay,
I could have easily argued for a 7.5 million dollar valuation, and he would have had 1% instead of 10%. That was the mistake. The mistake wasn't like, oh, you should have gone and raised money. Because the reality is, I mean, some people you raise money from in 3 years, if you're like, hey, can I buy you out? Sometimes their investors are like, sure, but usually that's not the path that they're on. They're like, nope, you're going to scale this up and sell it, and I'm going to get a big return. So it worked out for us. It was obviously very expensive. I think it's like, I don't know. There was another guy too. There was two guys who each took 10%. The guy who did my brand and website and look and feel and all that stuff. There were two guys who each had 10%, and it was very expensive to unwind it.
but keeping them was it sounds like keeping them wasn't an option. It was this like there was a period where enough, you're out.
Yeah, the problem with giving people a bunch of equity at the beginning of a company, and I tell people who are starting a company, because oftentimes it's like you've got a technical co-founder or someone's going to build the thing or whatever. The problem with giving them a bunch of equity is oftentimes they leave
Right.
or they like stop doing anything, right? And it's like, I know you did a lot to start this thing, but I'm not going to grind out for the next like 10 years for your like while you ride on my coattails. Like that's just not fair, right? So it gets to be like a little bit unfair if they're not like in the room. At least that's how it felt. Like what we had set out to build and what we built required a tremendous amount of work from those of us who like stayed on, and the fact that they were holding on just didn't feel fair.
So I'm going to jump ahead, but what do you recommend for startups who are in that same team building scenario? Like I need to have someone do this service feature thing for me, and I
Yeah.
can't afford to pay them, and all I have is equity
Yeah, vested.
vested.
Vested over time, right? So, vested over 3 years, 4 years, something like that, so that they like you could take that 10% and you could vest it over a 4 year period. And then if they walked away after 1 year, they've got 2.5% of the company instead of 10%. If
Got
they
it.
last and are adding value for 4 years, like, yeah, they deserve 10%. But if they're there just to make some introductions, and granted, like this individual, I would not have been able to start the company without him, so it was very valuable. But he got a lot of money, so
You got a lot of money for it. Yeah.
I feel fine at night about it. But yeah, you vest shares, and also you don't give them to them at such a crazy valuation. What I've found is like, especially in this company, a lot of people want to call themselves a co-founder. Like, and at the end of the day, it's like who's signing the documents? when you sign that first lease, when you sign that first bank thing, when you have to personally guarantee your first credit card, because usually they force you to, although I can talk about that. I think that's bad idea. But like when you do all those things, there's like one guy who puts his name down or her name down. That's the founder. And like everyone else is just kind of like, along for the ride. So at least that's how it was the second time.
Keep telling, keep going. Tell me more.
Well, I've just seen, I mean, right now in direct to consumer, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of companies that are going under for a whole host of reasons, much of which has to do with COVID, and then people ramped up their fixed expenses and now they're paying the piper. And I am shocked at the number. Like, if you have an Amex business card, it is almost definitely personally guaranteed by you.
Yeah.
So, like, and they will remove that over time, but you have to fight for it and you have to ask for it and you have to make sure that they sign the document and all of that. And so there are these people who are like, yeah, we're going to be out of money. We got some wage obligations. I'm going to pay severance and then we don't have any money. And I'm like, you have an $800,000 credit card bill. They're like, yeah, I know. Like, we'll have to figure that out. It's like, dude, that's yours. Like, you're going to have to go personally bankrupt. Well, it's like, oh, but I took investment capital, and it's like, yeah, they don't care. They're not touching that. So I think people forget that piece like that, and it's kind of like a simple piece, right? It's like, oh, I didn't even know. And there are many ways in which you can get burned, but that one in particular is, especially with Amex, it seems like that's what I keep hearing about is like that Amex card that you thought was just like, backed by your VCs or something, but it's actually backed by you.
Don't use my Amex card.
Yeah,
Lesson learned, taking
yeah,
notes.
yeah.
So
Careful.
going back to that team building stuff, do you have any recommendations on how do you find or pick your founding team? Or are you really just like, it's me, it's only me, it's me, myself, and I, and the three of us are going to do all of it?
No, definitely not. I mean, it wasn't me, only me. So when I started ButcherBox, so I closed the doors, like literally shut the gate of custom made and put the lock on, and everyone was gone. Everyone was fired. We had like a big party. We all drank, and then we just left. And I took the weekend off. And Monday morning, I had an intern from Babson, a Babson undergrad intern, knocking on my door. Hey, what are we gonna do? Like what? Like, hey, I'm here for work. What are we gonna do? And I did that because I didn't think I would get out of bed if it was up to just me. Right. And I think the lesson there is you have to know what you're good at as a founder. I think there's a lot of noise about entrepreneurs have to go raise money. There's probably even more noise about this lie of 24/7, 365, that you need to be on all the time and just doing everything. And the reality is, you need to solve for everything, but you don't need to do everything. What you want to do is the stuff that really fires you up. Like what turns you on. Do that stuff. Everything else, try to get off of your plate, even when you're starting. And so I knew that, I just come from running a company of 60 people. I knew, even though I was trying to start the business for under $10,000, I knew that if I didn't have somebody like to tell to go do something and to keep me motivated, I would just like sit around and watch TV or whatever. I would not be like motivated. So yeah, I had an intern for $11 an hour. That guy and subsequent like first batch of people were all like hungry. Grit
Mm.
is what I was solving for. So D1 athletes, great schools, uh, um, let's see. Yeah, D1 athletes, great schools. Uh, Daddy issues is a big one, like broken homes, kind of like, some sort of something that makes them a little bit like chip on my shoulder. I don't care. I will just keep pounding my head against this wall. And
Daddy issues? So how do you interview for daddy issues?
Well, I'm very open about the fact that I came from like a divorced house and sometimes
Okay.
people, share along in it. But yeah, it's just that grit. You're kind of looking for that grit. So my first marketing guy had like just run his company into the wall. And he actually came to me for advice on how to unwind his company. And I was like, you should just come work with me because I'm like doing this thing and I'm looking for someone to like help me with my Kickstarter. And he's like, great, let's do it. Um, but one of the things that we did that I think is pretty smart is we did this what I call the barbell strategy. So we would have these super young, like hungry, gritty, machete choppers trying to find a
Your
path.
plan. Okay.
And then we would pair them with like super old experienced people. Like so from the beginning, we had this Omaha Steaks guy, right? 70 years old, been at Omaha Steaks for 30 years, knew the industry. Like, so he kind of like made sure that we weren't making any huge mistakes. And so I could pair these people who are young and hungry and had no experience whatsoever with people who are on the tail end of their career. And I started liking that enough that I pulled my first meat guy out of retirement. My first chief information officer was out of retirement. My first like supply chain person was almost about to retire. There was a whole crop of people who were near retirement who actually, and this is true today, like are oftentimes passed over. Like people oftentimes look at like somebody who's like 70 years old and it's like, no way, they probably don't even know how to turn on a computer. And they have like 30 more years of experience than the 40-year-old you're thinking about hiring.
Yep.
And they're at a different stage of life where like they're not trying to coach soccer, they're not trying to make this the biggest career move of their life. They just want like a fun job that they can contribute, that young people are like, "Oh, teach me everything about what you know." And so we called it the barbell strategy, which was like hire young and hire old and like kind of avoid the middle. And that worked really well. So that was the main hiring strategy. And so the difference this time, so I have this analogy that like building a startup is like hacking through the jungle with machetes. And you're just trying to find a path, right? You're just like hacking around trying to find a path. And you're like, oh, there's a path. And you're like, let's go down that one. Oh, wrong path. Okay, let's go over here. And then eventually you find a road. In my first company, that road, we got to the road and we see this like big, beautiful Google bus. And we're like, ooh, let's jump on the Google bus. My co-founder and I jump on it and we look back and we're like, you guys don't belong here. We're going to leave you in the jungle. And we left them like all in the jungle and we went on the Google bus. This time I was like, I'm going to teach these people how to drive. I need to teach them right away. Like, I know we're hacking and we're finding a path, but like, what would it look like to teach people how to drive before we get to the bus? And the way that I did that was with people at the tail end of their career who had so much more to give, and had frankly have been passed over by a job market that just doesn't like cater to people with a lot of experience.
That sounds like extreme leadership when you're teaching your team how to drive. What was that like? What was that experience like? And how big is your team for ButcherBox?
Team now is 200 people.
200 people.
I always caveat that with we don't own any of our backbone. So I started this as a hobby business and we've maintained that structure today. So we outsource, like we don't own our own farms. We don't own our own processing facilities. We don't own our own pick, pack, ship facilities. We don't own our own customer service. We don't do our own shipping. Like all of that is third party. So the dance that is ButcherBox is thousands of people, but on our actual payroll is 200. And that includes the one thing that we do own is we have two dry ice machines. We have two dry ice factories. Because if you don't have dry ice, you can't ship a box. And so and during COVID, especially when there was the Trump accelerate depreciation, we bought two machines, located them near dry ice, and have been making dry ice. That's about 25 of the 200. And then we have 175, your normal workers.
And is your beef supply, I'm going to ask supply chain questions,
Yeah.
is that located in a specific region of the country? And that's where you located your dry ice?
Yeah, no. So yeah, you did get one thing wrong in the bio. So
Oh, sorry.
we don't exclusively source our beef from the United States. We have a big program in Australia as well. And no, so we have 5 distribution centers, and that's kind of where all the product goes to. So we have one in Delaware, one in Florida, one in Oklahoma, one in Wisconsin, and one in California. That's where the meat, like, so the meat comes in from all different places. We have, pork providers in Pennsylvania and Iowa, and we have chicken providers in California and Virginia and Delaware, and like so. It's a very wide, fairly complicated system. Those go into 5 distribution centers, and that's where they do pick pack. So we locate our distributions because we're frozen. We locate our distribution centers as close as possible to the customer. We're about 93% 1 day in transit for the lower 48. And that means less dry ice, less weight, less expense, etc. Dry ice is actually it's all about CO2. And so CO2, carbon dioxide, there's two types of CO2. I like know more about this than I wish I did, but there's like food grade CO2 and non-food grade CO2. Food grade goes into like beverages, so that's gets bought up by Coca-Cola. Non-food grade it comes out of the ethanol process or ammonia plants. That's really like the two places. And so we have one of each. We have in Iowa near ethanol, near corn production, and then in Oklahoma near an ammonia plant.
Learning more about dry ice.
Oh my gosh, it's like that's what I mean. That's what I love about what I do now is it's very right brain, left brain. The right brain is like creativity, like how are we going to go, meet our market and like what's our message and all that and what's the best experience and dialing and all that stuff. And then left brain is just like the numbers and the like geeking out about every single piece of the supply chain is that's what I love. Like the one thing that the Omaha Steaks guy, other than making the introduction, he did, what he told me was he's like, look, Mike, all Omaha Steaks cares about is dollars per box. I said, what does that mean? He's like, everyone knew how much money we made off of every box that left our facility, right? And so, oh, a box leaves the facility, we made $35. When you fully load it with like the credit card fees and the cost of the box and everything, it's like $35. And then what everyone's focused on is like, how do you increase that? And so one piece of increasing that is adding more products to the box, getting your customer to buy more. But a big piece of that is negotiating everything. Like we would negotiate the cardboard box, we would negotiate the tape, we would negotiate the glue, we would negotiate every piece of like meat that goes in there. We were constantly trying to get better pricing because that increased our dollars per box, some of which we could pass on to the customer. But like that became the mantra. And I believe like my favorite thing to do with companies when people are like, can I raise money or I want to be a bootstrap founder or whatever, is I get their P&L and I look at their credit card processing fees and I just do credit card processing as a percentage of revenue and just run it out and see if they've done any negotiation on that line item. Because it's the easiest one to negotiate. It's like you just call Stripe and you're like, hey, we're doing a lot more. Can we get a reduction? And they're like, sure, no problem. They'll just like march you down. If you haven't lifted a finger to do that, there's no way you're negotiating everything else. So like that, it's like, but you need that mindset in order to win in at least in a business where you're like shipping a physical product.
I'm wondering right now how many founders who ship a product who have never thought to negotiate with their credit card processing
Right.
fees.
A lot. I could tell you a lot because I see them all the time. I'm like, dude, this is easy. That's the easy part. Never mind the box, the shippers. Like you can negotiate with FedEx and UPS and all these people like constantly. You're just constantly negotiating with everybody.
When you went through that process, you were at a certain scale? I'm assuming that this was scale driven.
Well, the dollars per box started at the very beginning. Like
Okay.
first boxes out the door. So we did a Kickstarter to start because I didn't want to like start a big company without, so hey, let's see if there's a market here. There was a market, so we shipped out those boxes. We were shipping everything out of Wisconsin. We knew at the time we were making like $15 per box shipped. But when you looked at the data, we were losing $20 on every shipment to California because it was a 5 day in transit ship. But it was like, no problem. Once we get to whatever it was, 1,000 boxes, we'll open in California. So we're going to keep shipping those boxes, even though we're losing on them. And then like, no, we're right from the beginning, we were looking at dollars per box, and it was like part of the language, part of the learning for the people on the team.
You mentioned the Kickstarter. I have a question about that. How did you decide to use Kickstarter? What was that process like? How complicated was it? Was it a nightmare? Was it exciting?
No, it was
Would you
okay.
do it again?
Yeah, my first business was custommade.com, which was a two-sided marketplace. You have a maker who makes stuff and you have a buyer, and you have to like attract both of them to the platform. And so when we started building that marketplace after we took the Google money, I just went to be like I just went to town learning as much as I could about two-sided marketplaces. And two-sided marketplaces, whether it's like eBay or Etsy or Amazon third-party marketplace or Kickstarter, they have this dynamic where there's a point in time where it's like arbitrageable. So, where if you know how to play by the rules, you can have an outsized reward. And so my best example, which hopefully a lot of people on your call know, is like it used to be you could like drop your stuff off at an eBay store. So eBay used to have like people had these stores like I'll sell your stuff on eBay. Why? Because they were the ones that knew how to like write a good description, take a good photo, and they could make a premium because they knew how to play the game. No one else knew how to play the game. Nowadays, you just like scan your barcode and you list it. Like eBay took that away. And so that arbitrage is gone. So I had a belief that we could go on Kickstarter and like see if there was a market because I didn't want to start the company and take on inventory and do all these things. I'd like you'd need a lot more money to do that. So we decided to launch Kickstarter. I decided to launch Kickstarter, but I thought it was like gameable. And what Kickstarter had, which they still have, I don't know if it's still gameable, is they had this Kickstarter verified badge. And if you got the Kickstarter verified badge, you went from like you emailing your network and being like, please fund my Kickstarter to now when you're verified, you show up as the first thing in food. You show up on the homepage. You show up in search results. And there are people on Kickstarter who actually just browse around all day and buy stuff. And so instead of us pushing to our network, it was pull, like it was other people. And so we gamed it. Like we just basically watched a bunch of me and my intern. We watched a bunch of campaigns. We saw which ones got verified, and we looked at the patterns. And the patterns were they blew through their goal in the first couple days. Like there were a couple social media mentions. There was like a few things, and it was like let's just do that. So we ran that. So we went out to raise 25,000. We raised 40,000 in the first day. And then we were verified. And then by the end, it was like 220,000 that we did. So
Wow.
we sold like 100 or 1,100 boxes. And then we shipped out the meat like immediately, like a week later, which no one expected because Kickstarter is usually like you have to wait like forever. And
So
then
you were ready to go with the supply chain.
as soon as we started seeing, we had the vendor. As soon as we started seeing roughly how much we were going to be shipping, we started talking to the vendor about how much meat we were going to need. And again, because we didn't raise any money, we did something like fairly unique. And it all hinges on this idea like I'm not raising money. I'm not going to raise money. So one, we had a curated box. Most people are like, well, I want to be able to choose what I want in my box. And I believed that given like Blue Apron and some of these other meal kit companies that were out there, that people wouldn't mind if we just sent them a random box of meat. And that worked really well for inventory control, right? Because if you're trying to guess at how many ribeyes people want, you're going to just like order way too many and they're going to sit on a shelf until you sell them. But if you're just guessing like, oh, all beef box is 6 different cuts of meat, we're going to like choose those cuts. Then you can bring it in on a Monday, ship it all out on a Friday. And so that's what we did. We also did chicken and pork, and now we do like salmon and or
It must have
seafood
been a
and
good
lamb
call
and
though to the vendor. It's like, hey, we've got 1,100 orders on Kickstarter. We're gonna need a lot of beef.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They knew that we were doing this. They were watching too. They were pretty excited. They're like, "Holy cow! Like, look at these guys. They're like selling on Kickstarter." Okay. And then we shipped out those boxes, and then we called all those people. Which again, like that is, if you put me in a room with a phone and said call 1,100 people, I'd be like, hell no. Like,
You
not for
called
me.
all of them?
Yeah. And we got like 45. Well, no, I guess we sent them an email first and then we called them. So not all 1,100, but we got about 45% of them to turn into subscribers. And so right away we had like 500 subscribers and then we just, snowballed it from there and just kept growing and growing and growing.
I got it. So the Kickstarter was really just order your box, test the marketplace,
Yep.
and then you were converting them from after they got their first delivery. What do you think? You want to
Yep.
Okay.
Although we also sold like a year and a 6 month subscription, mainly so I could like call up people like my mom and have her put in $1,000 so we could hit our goal really fast.
Oh, nice.
So
Okay.
there was other ones too, which gave us extra breathing room to be able to then like, grow the company.
Gaming the system. All right. So I'm looking at the time. So question about the future. Are you going to exit? Like what's the plan here? Where do you see this going? Because you
Yeah,
own the whole
so
company.
right now it's 100% employee and me owned. I own about 75% of the company and the employees own the rest. And we're loving what we're doing. And every 3 years, I write this like 3 year vision. I took it from Cameron Herold. He wrote this book, Vivid Vision, where you go and take a walk, you get with nature, you like try to let your heart tell you, like you try to like tune into what the company is looking for and what your heart tells you the company's looking for, and you write it down. Like where are we going to be? And it's really a vivid vision. So it's you wake up, where are you waking up? You go to work, like how much work are you doing? Like I didn't talk about this, but I do think entrepreneurs really need to structure your lifestyle plan. Like what do you want your life to look like? It's way more important than what you want your business to look like. And so the business just feeds the lifestyle that you want, rather than writing a business plan and then like hoping that you can fit your life into the business plan. That's backwards. Like what kind of life do you want? So I did that every 3 years, and right around COVID, it was like, all right, what's the next 3 years look like? And I was like, you know what? The time horizon is totally wrong. 3 years is not the right way to look at this. And so I wrote a 100 year vision. And the idea was that if you look at iconic food brands in the United States, like Coca-Cola, Campbell's, Hershey's, Mars, Tyson, they're all very common. They've been around for over 100 years. They're largely family controlled, and they're mostly privately owned. Some of them have like gone public a little bit. Some of them have gone like Coca-Cola's gone totally public, but a lot of them stay private and family owned and run for a very, very, very long time. And so at that point, it was just like, why don't we just at least build towards that? Because that's what I believe is needed in order to transform meat. Like ultimately, what is our mission here? What are we trying to do? We're trying to transform an industry that's in woeful need of transformation. Meat is a $220 billion industry in the United States. And the way that most animals are treated, the way that the environment is treated, the way that farmers are paid is a travesty. And if people only knew, like every time that they put chicken in their mouth, like where it's from and what's happened, they would like, which is starting to happen. People would wake up and be like, I'm not supporting this system anymore. I need to do something different. But that transformation is going to take a really long time. Right. And
Right.
so instead of us taking this, like, let's exit really fast, like for what? What am I going to do? I'm going to erase my whiteboard and start over and be like, what's next? Like, I'm not done. So it just doesn't make any sense. So I always also preface that by saying, I don't have an offer on my desk. So it's a lot easier to say, like, I'm not selling. If there was an offer, that it might be harder. But at this point, love what we're doing. I do think the company will outlast me in terms of like I can imagine someone else taking the reins. But I'm in no rush to sell. I don't think there's any reason to, and I don't think we'll be able to like actually transform an industry. A lot of the decisions that we have are like a perfect one, and then we'll open it up. I know I'm
Yeah.
rambling, but worker welfare is like on my heart right now. So these plants are really awful places. Some people do a lot better than others, but like oftentimes people are, you're talking about refugees, you're talking about like the cleaning crew that comes in. There's been a whole bunch of Department of Justice cases with kids. It's just like it's awful. And I don't want to support that anymore. I want to build like a system where we're getting meat from companies that actually care about that and treat their employees well and all that. So there is no like fair trade equivalent. Like if I was trying to get coffee or I was trying to get a t-shirt in a foreign country, it'd be really easy to be like, okay, we're going to bring in fair trade and they're going to do all this stuff. That doesn't exist in the United States. There's nobody who will go into a meat plant and be like, yep, these people are being treated well. We'll make sure the dollars get allocated to them. Like, yeah, they're good. And so it's, you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just going to ask you about that sustainability transformation. Is that not how do you drive that? I mean, that seems like it's a consumer behavior that really needs to change across the board.
Yeah, well, or a supplier or a buyer behavior like us, right?
Got it.
Who's willing to put in the work because it's like, okay, there's no agency to do that. It's like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? Well, somebody would have to like get this thing going. It's like, yeah, why don't we do that? Like, why don't we actually try to push that forward instead of pointing around and being like, who's gonna fix this? It's like maybe it's us. Uh,
Beautiful.
so
First of all, thanks for this. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I just have one last question for you. By the way, and folks, if you have any questions, please do raise your Zoom hands and I'll call on you. Agentic AI, because this is a part that's
yes.
important to me. Where do you see the future with AI? Is that something that you're focusing on? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So we are definitely implementing AI in our customer experience. There are a lot of interesting applications for AI, including like understanding people's preferences, understanding if they're going to leave or not, understand like a whole like are they happy? Our game is to try to keep you happy and eating our product for as long as possible. So there's a lot of applications that you could use AI for. And then the agentic thing is really interesting. I we I for we do this thing once a month where we it's a financial and operational review where every department like gives all their numbers. And I've been feeding that into AI and been like, okay, take a marketing lens and tell me your top three concerns. Take a operations lens. It's amazing. I mean, it's like who needs a board? If they, it's like so. And then my COO is like talking to people who have like whole, all these different personas who are just like basically running the company. And she's like, we should start building some of that. So we're definitely messing around with it because it's like it's really interesting and definitely here to stay. And I mean, I just told my wife this week, like I feel like ChatGPT is like my best friend who knows all the answers to everything, and like I can feed it anything, and it just like pops out answers, which is scary and also like kind of a really fun, brave new world.
It's a brave new world, exactly. All right, let's go to some Q&A. Kelly Kimball, you are up, sir.
Yeah, I'm also on a plane, and my plane's about to take off. So I wanted to jump in really quickly and say two things. Number one, Mike, thank you for coming. I love your story back at Harvard. Love it here. I do have a question though. You said something at Harvard that I found incredibly intriguing and funny. Why do you have bacon in the box?
That's a good story. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So when we did our Kickstarter, one of the things that we did is you want to have these reasons to like get people excited because at a certain point you want them to share with their audience and try to get more people to back Kickstarter. And so we did this thing like if we hit 100,000 in sales, everyone will get free bacon in their first box. And so we just started this flurry of like referrals from all the people. They're like, I need to get bacon, so like please buy this Kickstarter. And so we started shipping out those boxes and putting bacon in all the boxes in all those 1,100 boxes. And then we started our website at ButcherBox, and then it was about 2 weeks into because what happened is our Kickstarter closed, and then some people who didn't get in on the Kickstarter went to our website and started buying, so they were buying. About 2 weeks in, my tech team comes to me. They're like, "We have a big problem." And I was like, "What's going on?" With my tech guy, one guy, he's like, "We've been sending out bacon to everybody. Like everybody who signed up has gotten bacon." And we're sitting there like, oh, geez, that's a problem. Okay. And my marketing guy's like, why don't we just start selling it like free bacon in your first box? Because we can't get rid of it. So we might as well just start selling it. And so everything then became like free bacon in your first box. And I like to say this company was built on bacon. We went from that. We then did free bacon for life at one point. There was like International Bacon Day. And we're like, what do we do? And let's do free bacon for life. Which was if you buy, we will put bacon in every box from here on out, which has become a thing now. Like lots of companies are doing it, and we did it because we signed up a ton of people, but it also turns out that you get much better lifetime value. Like people stay longer because they have these lifetime deals that they don't want to get rid of. Yeah, so that's the bacon story.
A good bacon story. Thank you, Kelly. Adolfo.
Thanks, Mike. This has been fantastic. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll just choose one for now. It's fascinating the decision you made to mix generations, so to speak, right? Young and hungry with old and experience. How do you keep that going on? How do you make it sustainable over the years as people retire or they really want to quit, and then the young and hungry are no longer younger?
Yeah, they're no longer young and no longer hungry. Yeah.
Right. How do you keep that going?
You keep hiring young, which we've actually just started to like really do again. Um, I haven't talked about this piece, but we have hit this point really in 2022 of we hit 500 million in revenue, and kind of everything changed. Like the whole corporate life cycle went from like entrepreneurial and go-go and young and hungry to like we need like experienced people. And we swung way too far into the land of like process, which I'm happy to say we're now out of and kind of back. But yeah, you hire young people. You get those people right out of college or a couple of years out of school. And then we've continued to look for people at the tail end of their career to help guide the team. Whether those are mentors, like, hey, I'll take a risk on this guy to run marketing, but I'm going to pair him with somebody who, spent 20 or 30 years in marketing to be like, to be their set of eyes, their sounding board, et cetera. So sometimes they're employees, sometimes they're consultants. But I'm always trying to pair wisdom with being young and hungry. Wisdom is incredibly important. I'm 43. Most of my mentors are like, 75 plus, because there is a lot of wisdom in age. And yeah, I just think it's another arbitrage. Like if I boil down the Facebook thing or the Facebook the if I boil down the ButcherBox journey from Kickstarter to these other things, which I didn't get into, but it's like finding these opportunities that kind of are being passed over or people aren't thinking about and doing things differently. And that worked for us.
Fantastic. Great story. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Adolfo. So Kelly just put in the Zoom chat. I'll come to Victor in a second. Are you experiencing any cultural difficulties now that you are at a couple hundred employees?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe I'll just talk a little bit more about this because hopefully some of you will hit this point, right? So you grow a company, it's going great, you hire more people, it's going really well. We grew incredibly quickly. We did 5 million, 30 million, 100 million by year. So 5 million, 30 million, 100 million, 220, 450, 550. And then we started slowing down. So it was like 550, 560, 500. And then last year we got it back up to like 530. So we had our first down year, which was a pretty big down year. And you look at it and it's like, why did you go down? And well, there's a lot of trends like COVID, like people going back to vacationing, Facebook, iOS changes, harder to track people, but none of that we can control. The only thing we can control is in the company. And if I look at the company critically, as we did, it's like, one, we've gotten too top heavy. All those young, hungry people want to keep moving up. And so what do? We're like, you're a manager, you're a manager, you're a manager, you're a manager. We looked around at one point, we had 200 people and we had 87 managers for 200 people. It was like, and what you look at, and apparently this is what private equity people do, what you look at is like, I had 8 direct reports and my direct reports had a whole bunch of direct reports. And so then there's this middle layer that like they just have like one person that they're managing. And it just is incredibly inefficient. They're new at managing. So we've spent the past 2 years like cleaning that up. Like I would say most of our issues have been operational and process oriented versus cultural oriented. Culture wise, because I lost my culture at my first company and couldn't get out of my car, we were very strict about having company values. So we within the first year set our company values. We have 5 company values, and we We teach them, we screen against them on the way in, we give you reviews against them, like we pound in the cultural values into the company. And I think so, like culture-wise, we were decent, but operationally and like how we were getting work done, and it just felt like we were moving through mud for a long time. And I'm happy to say it feels like we're out of that from a whole bunch of work, and like we're now, I'm hoping to put up, several double-digit growth. And yeah,
What
it's
are those
fun
values?
again.
Card, I'm just putting those in chat. Sorry, Victor. What are those values?
Yeah. So we have 5 values. I like to say that 2 of them are how we want you to show up, and those are humble and authentic. We're not meat people. Some of us are meat people, but in general, we're not meat people. Also, eating meat is like people have to trust us, and I think being humble and like true and authentic is really important. Then there's like, how do we want you to do your work, which is accountable. So we want you to be accountable to your work. And then relentless improvement, which is like the story of negotiating everything. So like constantly trying to improve the experience and improve the pricing, and it's relentless, right? It's like all the time. And then the last one is customer obsessed. So really inviting the customer into every conversation, making decisions not based, especially as a long-term hold, if we're going to be around for 100 years, we have to like really honor our customer and care about our customer first versus like getting revenue this quarter because like we need revenue. Like we don't do that. We think about the customer.
I love it. Victor, you are up, sir.
Yes, Mike, thanks so much for coming to talk to us tonight. It's been quite a story, but also very intriguing to listen to how you think and how you see the world that you've been through. It's very intriguing.
Thank you.
I had 2 areas of question very briefly. The first one has to do with your remark early on about vesting equity shares so that you get the value from them and you mitigate the risk, as you described it, of losing people or losing engagement really. So the person that you found so much value from coming from the Omaha company and the industry, do you feel like if vesting was part of that conversation that they would have come on, or would you have had to look elsewhere?
So the shorter answer is yes, he would have, but the longer answer is I've been doing this for a long time, 18 years, as I said. And I have given out equity to virtually everybody in both companies. So I don't know how many employees over both companies, but 500 people. I've had two in my entire career, like ask about the equity plan. And they only really, at both of them, only really asked a question about like page 2 or page 3, meaning literally nobody read the document. Now that might be different in Silicon Valley because people have a lot more experience with equity, but people don't read the document. And so that does like I believe that you have a duty to your employees, right? And to help them understand what they're getting. And really, I'm not saying take advantage of them because that's just not how I roll at all. But I am saying that like you can position that as a good thing for them, and you won't get much pushback from it. If they're willing to work for like nothing, or for equity, I think they're willing to vest it as well.
It's interesting. The thought that crossed my mind was there's only 100% of equity to give, so you have to be judicious about it and make sure that it leverages your intentions, let's say, which it sounds like you've done very well. My second question had to do with Google. I'm wondering, and I understand if you don't want to answer this outright, but at some point you opened the hood and let Google in to see everything.
Yep.
Did you have a sense at the beginning of that or anywhere along the way that they were doing reconnaissance for their own benefit and that it was not in your company's best interest?
You mean for like the benefit of Google corporate or?
Well, for the benefit of knowing if this is yet another business that they want to compete in and
Oh,
kind of
no.
get under the hood.
They were really well behaved in the realm of like what do they call it? Like a Chinese wall in between like Google corporate and Google
Mhm.
Ventures.
Mhm.
I thought very highly of Google Ventures. I thought they were a stand-up like venture capital firm. Because they threw all these services at you in addition to the money. But no, I never thought like, oh my God, they're going to come after us. That never crossed our mind. If anything, we thought it was a better move to raise from Google because we had all this inbound traffic,
Mhm.
right? It was like 85% of our traffic was SEO from Google. If you typed in custom made, bookshelf, jewelry, whatever, you're going to land on us. And we thought in some ways, even though they would never tell us they were doing this, that it might be protectionary for us to take money from them because maybe they would make sure that their algorithm like
Mhm. Mhm.
keep funneling
Interesting.
up people.
As I said, I love the way you think. And I appreciate that insight. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Victor. All right, so Andrea just had her hand up and she put it down, and I'm DMing her like what? Because apparently you just answered the question. So I'm going to cold call on Andrea, and we're going to bring her back up here.
Oh, you
Huh?
spotlighted me too.
Oh no, I'm totally calling in you.
Hi, Mike. It's it's so nice to meet you and hear your story. I've just been fascinated the whole time. And what made my jaw drop was when you said that you're forecasting $580 million in revenue and it still feels like a hobby, which is absolutely incredible. Um, and then I'm a founder myself at an ag tech company. And so just thinking about this and hearing your story and your journey has been very relatable as well because I myself am preparing to start raising capital. And hearing your perspective has sort of made me, rather than think, oh, I need to go directly to investors, think about the other opportunities. But I guess one of the things that I personally have also been dealing with and have been curious as to how to be better is as like the CEO and the leader, we have so many ideas all the time. And I feel like I'm in conversations with my team. And we'll be talking about something and they go, oh, we could do that. Oh, we could do that. Oh, we could do that. And it's like all this coming in at once. And I feel like I myself am flustering myself and then I'm flustering my team. And then I'll go after that and say, okay, no, let's do this list. But how do you do that? How do you manage that and make sure that it's clear to your team and that all of the ideas that are coming in for growth and what you could do don't get all jumbled up and mixed in?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Okay, so I'm very goal oriented. And so we will have annual goals, like 3 to 5.
Hmm.
And then like we will boil those into quarterly goals. And then like you would put the initiatives under the quarterly goals, right? So if the annual goal was like sign up 10,000 people. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, great. In the first quarter, I need 1,500. And then it's like, okay, what are we going to do to get those 1,500? And
Hmm.
what I like to do is I'll have like a goal be like that goal would be like one person's job to like run that goal. And then I give them a lot of autonomy. It's like, hey, I have some ideas, but like you go do whatever you want, but you're going to hit that number, right? And then we would be
Yeah.
checking in on a weekly basis. Like, are you gonna hit that number? You gonna hit that number? Because like if you hit that number, then we're good for the quarter, and then we'd be better off for the year. And then I would always do like some sort of crazy prize. Like if we hit the goals, we would go do something like crazy, like pay out big or do something where it's like, wow, we just did it. Uh,
uh,
and so that's how I like, and yeah, like I still run with ideas every minute, and it's really important to like um, you can obviously, as a CEO, usually be like, stop doing what you're doing and do this. But you
hmm.
have to be really clear that it's actually feeding one of the goals. And if you don't have the goals, then like you're just going to distract and distract and distract because no one knows where you're going. And I think
Hmm.
as you're smaller, it's more important to like be really refined, like very, very small amount of goals. And then I do
Hmm.
want to say something on your other point, which is like I said this kind of in passing, but I'm just going to say it again because I think it's incredibly important for people who want to start a company. I think when people say I want to start a company, the first thing they do is they get out a piece of paper and they start writing a business plan. It's like, I'm going to do this, like this is my company, this is the total addressable market, whatever, and I'm sure Harvard can teach a really good class on how to do that. I don't think that's the best entrepreneurs I know did not do that. The best entrepreneurs I know started with a lifestyle plan. Like, what do you want your life to look like in 3 years? Where do you want to wake up? Who do you want to wake up next to? Do you want to go to the office or do you want to stay at home? Do you want to go to the gym? Do you want to be there to drop your kids off at school? And then what do you want your day to look like? Do you want to be on calls? Do you want to be talking to investors? Do you want to be talking to customers? You like architect the day that you want, like the day that like speaks to you and you're like, I would love this. This is what I'm here for. And then build a company around that. Because if you don't do that, what happens is these companies, like, if you don't build boundaries, it'll eat you alive. So my first
Mhm.
company, I like gained 30 pounds. I worked pretty much every Saturday. I lost a whole bunch of friends. I gave everything to that thing. And it didn't work. It didn't work. And it had nothing to do, like I could not have worked any harder on it. It wasn't like, oh, I should have grounded it out for another 10 hours a week and that would have worked. Like it just
Yeah.
wasn't it, the company did not want to work. This time around, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to work on Fridays. And I haven't. I don't work on Fridays. I do mentoring calls. It's different now because my kids are in school, so like it's a little different. But I'm still like, that's when I'll do mentoring calls. That's when I'll do my thinking. But when my little kids were young, like we'd go to the science museum. I'd be playing with Legos. Like I was the full-on, full-time dad on Fridays, like taking care of them. And some people are like, oh, that's lazy, or like you're not working hard enough, or whatever. I actually, for one, I was there for my kids, which is awesome. Two, it was my thinking day. Because when you're on the ground playing with kids, it's like, oh, I just got this like great insight, which was amazing because I wasn't there. And three, it forced my team to grow up because they knew
Yes.
on Friday I wasn't going to be around. And so
Mhm.
they ended up like making decisions on their own and not like asking me. And all of that worked really well. It built autonomy and accountability, which is one of our core values. So yeah, I think like I if you're starting out and you're about to raise money, like yeah, and you're like, oh, this just sparked something, I would just get really curious about writing down like what do you want your day to look like? And if raising money and like shooting for the stars or whatever is like what your day looks like, awesome. But if it doesn't, like there's absolutely a path. The
Mhm.
most successful entrepreneurs I know have full control as much as possible, but full
Mhm.
control of their lifestyle, like what they want. They're like,
Mhm.
oh, I want to go skiing on a Tuesday, and they just go. Like that's what they do, like because that's what they want to do.
Mhm.
That is what I believe the dream of entrepreneurship is. And unfortunately, through schools and social media, like we've all been sold this bill of goods that you need to be like hustling all the time and just sacrifice everything. Like I just did a podcast, the guy's like, I don't believe in sunlight because it's a distraction. It's like, dude, like I'm sorry, but come on. Like you got to work that hard.
He doesn't
Don't be like
That's crazy. Thank you so much. And I can't agree more because I'm a big believer too in manifestation and truly believing, but also, of course, working hard. And so I think that just plays perfectly into it is creating this plan and having a visualization of it so that you know
that.
exactly what you're working towards.
The first, when I opened up my thing after 3 years and looked at it, I was like,
Mhm.
holy cow, it's exactly what's happening. It was like, it was
That's
eerie. So,
awesome.
yes, it's all like that manifestation thing for sure.
Mhm. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrea. All right, let's go to Susan, and then we'll go to Garrett, then Dean, and I guess we'll wrap up after that.
Well, this is just magnificent, Mike. Just wonderful. And so I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. And first, I'm going to tell you a story. So, in one of the Harvard things, the founder and CEO of HubSpot came on and spoke with us. And I mean, incredible story, you know, really, really cool stuff. But one of the most powerful things that he said, and hence my question to you, was he said, unsolicited, he said, I have imposter syndrome every day. And then we all were like, you know, holy shit, right? Holy cow. Holy cow. Um, you know, like how does that happen and what do you do about it? And we can't even believe somebody as successful as you has that every day. And he said, absolutely. And he said, there's a negative and there's a positive to it. So that's my question to you. Do you have it and how do you deal with it? And what is the value of it for you?
Yeah, I was trying to see if I could quickly pull up this image, but I can't find it. So I'm a big believer in the Enneagram, which is like a personality test. It's kind of the spiritual personality test thing. I'm a type 7, which is the glutton, the enthusiastic visionary. My like core affliction shows up differently than imposter syndrome. Like I definitely have imposter syndrome. I don't think I should be here. Like, yes. But my thing is it's like the story of Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill. And, the idea is that it's a version of hell, right? He pushes the boulder up the hill and then every day it rolls back down and then goes back down and pushes the boulder up the hill. Mine is like I just extend the hill. So I'm like, oh, like I'll feel settled once we've hit 100 million. And then we do that. And I'm like, did I say 100 million? I meant 200. And then it's like, did I say 200? Well, actually, I want to improve my health. And then it's like, well, that's going well, but I'm not happy at home. Or, so like mine is like a constant ravenousness about like what, like I'm not happy in this moment because I could have done X, Y, Z better. Um, but all of it is just a scheme that we come up with to keep us out of presence. And being present is so hard, especially in today's society. But yes, imposter syndrome. I like to say, somebody recently told me, he's like, you should take a little bit more credit. But my whole shtick is that like I went out to build a hobby and ButcherBox wanted to be something else. And it was like I equate it to like I always use Simone Biles. Like I imagine Simone Biles, the gymnast parents, like she's like doing backflips when she's 3 years old, and they're like, okay, gymnastics, like it, especially raising kids at the same time. It's like you realize that you don't have as much control as you think. And so I have no idea why ButcherBox wanted to be like as big as it wanted to be, and I feel like I'm along for the ride. And a lot of that is likely just, it wasn't me. Definitely wasn't me. It's like all the other people and, divine intervention and whatever else. Um, but yeah, I mean, my racket is to just constantly not be satisfied.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. All right. So, Divya, raise your hand. You got the last question, Divya. So, Garrett, you are up, sir.
I'm happy to stay longer too.
Oh, you can? Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mike, for coming on tonight and talking about this. I'm getting a lot out of it. Just to preface that. You talked about this guy that you were on LinkedIn, you were searching for somebody that, could help out with this problem you had.
Yep.
And I was curious, how did you start that conversation with him? And why do you think he responded to you or even gave you the time of day? Like how did,
I direct messaged him and I said something like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting this meat brand and I'm looking for somebody who can help me ship in the mail." And he wrote back.
he didn't ask you like any other questions that make him comfortable and
Oh,
or like
he
confident
was willing
and
to like get on a call, and then I
got
told
it.
him what I was trying to do, and he actually believed, having worked at Omaha, he believed that there was like white space for this idea of like shipping meat raised better in the mail. And that was something that was on his heart that Omaha never wanted to do, and so yeah, it just kind of worked out. But
Nice.
yeah.
So I had another follow-up on that. Whenever you had talked to him, did you have those 1,100 orders on
No. This was
no,
before. It was
before?
actually
Wow.
while I was still at Custom Made, I had reached out to him and been like, how do I make
Okay.
this work?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you just found the right guy and he took the chance on you and you had
I
the
I
connection.
stumbled on the right guy,
Yeah.
again. Like, yeah. And my hack, which I hope is not inappropriate, my hack was when I was in the bathroom, I would go on LinkedIn. That was like,
Okay.
that was my time to be like, okay, who am I going to reach out to? Who am I going to reach out to? And just like try to figure things out. So
I'm sorry, I got to interrupt, but
Awesome.
isn't that the default use of LinkedIn? Like, or is it just us?
I mean, I'm,
All
Garrett.
right.
hello, I'm
Yeah.
on the toilet, direct messaging you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Now I
Appreciate it.
know. Dean, you're up.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, it was
Thanks,
lovely
guys.
talking to you in the breakout. I've got two quick questions. First of all, why did you not select New Zealand? You selected Australia, and I'm a Kiwi. No, but just joking. But seriously, what made you look to go to Australia?
Yeah.
You've hit the ceiling, of your 580s around there, and you've went back a bit. Do you see yourself heading to other countries potentially? And do you also see major competition like you've been doing a long time? So is there been competitors come in? So there's sort of, are you looking, why did you select Australia? Do you see yourself going to Australia to other countries in competition? So it's three questions.
Okay, so competition wise, yes. HelloFresh launched a company called Good Chop, which is basically a ButcherBox lookalike, although they're cutting corners on meat. They're not doing what we're doing. They're not racing to the standards we are. They're not like all of that is different, but it's basically meat delivered to your door. There's also a company called like Good Rancher. Omaha Steaks has started doing like better stuff. And then the grocery store, one thing I'm very proud of is that the industry has actually started to respond to us. Like, so we used to go to the meat conference. There's a meat conference. We used to go to the meat conference and people are like, yeah, what is this? Like, ButcherBox, who are you? Now they're like, oh yeah, we know about you guys, and they're building out their own programs that actually care about this stuff, which I'm very proud of because what I care about deeply is like transforming the industry, and part of that is these big industry people realizing there's a market and satisfying the market, and so I think that's good. So yes, there are more competitors both in the grocery store as well as online. 2020 was when like every rancher tried to sell their stuff, and that's continued. Um, Moving internationally, probably. I don't know. It's probably a long way away. I don't feel like we're even close to like hitting our total addressable market in the United States. Right now, we have about 450,000 subscribers, and we've shipped a box to 1.8 million households. And so, there's 125 million households in the United States. So our total addressable market is like much, much bigger just here, and
Yeah.
dial in the experience. And it's hard to ship a box of meat. And Canada would probably be the first place to go. There is a butcher box operating in Canada, but it's not us. So, but yes, I think there is a way to do it, and we probably will at some point. But I think it's years away. To your last question about Aussie meat, yeah. So we started as a U.S. meat, but it's this grass-fed, grass-finished, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. And so in the United States, that's about 2% of the overall industry is grass-fed, grass-finished. So every cow starts out the same. It's cow-calf for 6 months. There's usually one person who does that, who's really good at the genetic side and like birthing these cows, and then they're with their mom. And then they sell it to somebody else who raises it for a year. And then at 18 months, the cow is sold to a feedlot in 98% of the time. 2% of the time, it's just kept on grass. The problem in the United States is the entire industry is built for feedlots.
Right.
And it's everything from like the loans. So the guy who buys a cow at 6 months, he has a loan for 12 to 14 months. He has to get rid of that cow because the bank won't give him, they won't finance the cow for another like 8 months so it can live on green grass. So there's all these reasons structurally why in the United States grass-fed hasn't been a thing. We've tried to stand up a program in the United States 6 times. It's never worked. We actually just launched a pasture raised but grain supplemented program, which is going really well because what we found is some of our customers are like, I don't want to eat Australian beef. I want US. And we're like, great, fine. Like, well, here's a product. It's not 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. In Australia, which I'm sure you know, being a Kiwi, is like the first time I went to Australia, they're like, well, let's go find the cows. And like they hadn't seen the cows in 3 months, literally. And they're driving around in Jeeps, like in these massive, like, like one of the ranches we went to is 95,000 acres.
Yeah. Huge.
And that type of land just doesn't exist in the US that's also super fertile and like just grass everywhere. And so my picture of grass-fed, which is like an animal just out on pasture, We used to call it like back to nature, like doing what nature intended. It didn't exist in this country anymore. And so we moved a lot of our beef program to Australia. It was the only way that we felt like we could scale it. And by the way, that was my meat guy who came in, who had retired, who I pulled out of retirement to run meat, who was like, "You're never going to do this just in the US because like the system is just not built for it."
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Divya.
Thank you, Mike. This was really great. Appreciate you taking the time. I love bootstrapping because so Kelly and I actually run a fund in Australia. And one of the things we keep telling the founders there is kind of put the concept of being a founder to the side. You are a business owner, right? You have to first make profit.
Yeah.
Like I think the minute people think they're a founder, it's that notion of going and raising money. So, just kind of, I loved your story with that. So when Susan was actually talking, asked her question, one of the things that came to me that I wanted to ask you was, what do you think is your superpower?
Oof. My personal superpower. Well, I think I'm a good storyteller. And I think that I am pretty good at sniffing out a trend before it's a trend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the visionary part of it?
Yes. I guess that's a better word for it, is like having a vision of like, oh, this is going to be a thing, or or willing it to be a thing. And then, yeah, I do have a like an insatiable curiosity and also determination and then I mean, I don't want to just list out a whole bunch of stuff. I think I'm supposed to have one, but
You can have more than one superpower. No, who said you got to limit?
I think my approach to people, employees, is very different than most people in my seat. I want to treat people incredibly well. I want everyone who comes in, whether they stay for a year or 20 years, to be like, that was the best place I ever worked. That was the best career decision I ever made. And building the structures to do that and giving people like way more responsibility than they think they can handle, and then trying to support them in that is like, that's the most rewarding and the most fun. And hopefully I'm pretty decent at that too.
I'm sure you're awesome at it. So I have one more question. So just something else that came to mind. Given from your visionary perspective, to kind of trying to get a little bit more. So with the whole AI thing playing out and the concept of how, till now, at least when you think of from a tech or general fundraising that went, was primarily to scale, right? Like that was kind of the premise of you got capital at certain points, or you raised little money to grow. Now, that whole concept of requiring capital to scale is out the door, right? You are not going to require capital, you can do it. So my question, or kind of your thoughts, would be, how do you think, just more broadly, how the business models itself, do you think the business models are going to shift to kind of, just with AI and things coming in, the concept of value capture, because if you're thinking from a product, it's very straightforward, right? If you're like a retail thing, but if you software and other tech things, the concept of value capture is going to evolve, right?
Yes.
That's going to change. So do you think like the business models of that side is going to shift? And then how businesses are going to require capital and when is going to change completely? So what are your thoughts on like, how do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, so there's this concept of like the J curve, which is like, how much are you investing? Like, so you invest, and then at some point you expect it to start paying back, right? And so if you're going to send a rocket into outer space, your J curve is like super steep. You're going to spend a ton of money to get that rocket into outer space, and then your revenues could go way up. I agree with you that you are going to need a lot less money to get things going on in terms of like technology and, you know, putting out a product and whatnot. I think the place where you're going to continue to have to spend real money is on distribution. Like, how do you get this into the hands of people? So what's happening right now, yeah, which we're seeing a lot of direct-to-consumer companies having a lot of trouble with, is just getting more and more expensive to acquire customers, right? So we're like, okay, you know, looks like we need to just spend more money on customers. So you just keep dumping money in. And we as a company have been around for long enough that we have lots of money and we're like, we want customers, so we're just going to go buy them. But if you're an upstart, like, how do you compete against me? And you really can't. And so what's happened is like Facebook and Google have priced themselves to perfection. I mean, it is a marketplace, right? And there are like arbitrageable opportunities every once in a while. Like Facebook changes something and you hop on it and like you can have outsized return. But those are few and far between. And so when you look at like what's happening in the like, I don't know, the overall startup ecosystem, it seems to me that it's a lot of like creator first stuff that's happening. It's like, you know, the Kardashians have $1 billion brand. It's like, okay. Um, it's Mr. Beast has a $200 million company. It's like all these like creators are doing things. So any business that you're going to start, I think like, yes, AI is going to have, it is already having and is going to continue to have a huge impact on like how fast you can get something to market and how cheaply you can get something to market. The problem is like, it's probably not as novel as it used to be. Like somebody could build their own version of the thing that you're doing. So then the question becomes, how do you get it into people's hands and do that cheaply and effectively? And I think that's a hard problem. Like I would not want to be starting a company right now. And if I was starting a company right now, I would want to be doing something that was like pretty far away from like the core technology stuff. I wouldn't want to be doing like, you know, a, a SaaS platform that is the same as everyone else's SaaS platform. I'd want to be like trying to platform like vending machines or something that's just like super
Out there.
old school
Yeah.
because I just think it would be really hard. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, because that's something that I've been like working through a lot with, because we're trying to figure out, you know, we started off as a venture fund and then we're like, that's not going to apply anymore. So what is the funding model really going to evolve to, right? So it's going to be an interesting landscape of what businesses get built to what the funding models for those are going to evolve. And I think like balance sheet strategy is actually going to become more important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for people, you know, starting out or thinking about running a company or something like that, I think like just trying to get going, like just getting on the path of entrepreneurship is like the best start. And then you just keep your eyes open to opportunities as they come because they're all over the place. It's just like, which ones are you going to jump on?
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Divya. Adolfo.
So I have a question about team and your thought process in building the team. And specifically, if I understood correctly, you said you have like 200 people in payroll, but there's like 1,000 people delivering the product or making it happen, right?
Roughly, yeah.
So what has been your thought process in deciding this function is something we're going to keep to ourselves? This function is
Yeah.
important, and this function we're going to outsource or contract. What is your thought process there?
Yeah.
Mike?
So if you remember, like I started the company wanting it to be a hobby. And truly what I wanted to do is I wanted to start the company and have it be one of these like Tim Ferriss 4 hour work week where you spend a few hours on this a week and like everything is outsourced. And that was the model. And as we got into it, I really liked that we didn't own all of these, like what I call our backbone. Like we didn't own our distribution center and we didn't own all these things. And you know, when I tend to be like I'm very much a who, not what type of person. So I'm not the smartest guy, but I know a lot of people. So I'm always looking for who can help me. And so in this case, it was like, okay, who do we know who has run this strategy? The strategy being, we're not going to own a bunch of our backbone. We're going to like outsource it. And so Toyota is one of the big ones, right? So Toyota has written a whole book about like just-in-time manufacturing and how they would hold. There's a book called The Toyota Way, which is all about like how Toyota would manage their vendors, keep them on a quarterly business review, be ruthless about their spec. And we implemented all of that. So if you're one of our partners, it's not like we're giving you a free ride. We probably treat you more hard than we do if you were an employee because like, you know, we're reviewing you, we're just doing a bunch of stuff to make sure that that you're meeting our standard. I believe like one of the challenges in direct to consumer right now is post-COVID, what a lot of these companies did is they were scaling 2020, 2021. It's like, oh my God. My best example is like Peloton, the bike company. So Peloton 2020, obviously just crushing it. They're just growing and growing and growing. And they're like, we can't get enough bikes to handle our growth. What do? They buy a $500 million bike manufacturing company in the United States. Or it was an exercise equipment manufacturing company in the United States. And the problem with doing that is you end up having a lot of what they call fixed assets. And the problem with fixed assets is, and I've seen this in many, there's different meat companies that bought plants and different companies that bought distribution centers and different people who bought factories. And like everyone, you don't buy for your current demand. You're always buying for like, oh, well, we should buy for above our current demand. And so you buy for like 2x your demand. And the problem with a factory is if you're not running that thing 24/7, you're losing money. And so a lot of companies right now, one of the struggles they're having, including Peloton, is they are losing money on those fixed assets that they bought at the tail end of 2020, 2021, 2022. And so we've just been very careful. Like we are an asset light model, which means like we don't have assets. We did do the dry ice machine. They were it was $1 million machine, each of them, which was not that much money. And the thing about dry ice is if my box doesn't have dry ice, I can't ship it. If we don't have chicken, it's like, man, okay, well, we don't have chicken this week. Sorry. Will you take a substitution or here's some money? But if we don't have dry ice, like we can't ship boxes. And so actually dry ice is like an incredibly important thing. And so what we saw was our math was like, we'll buy these machines, it'll be great. We'll run them at like 95% and we'll have the cheapest dry ice ever. And we'll have an insurance policy. I have never seen a month of dry ice being cheaper than I could have bought it on the open market yet. Uh, Still, right? And it's like we've been doing it for 4 years. We sell dry ice, like, and it's because one, we didn't scale as fast as we wanted to because we were underwriting a lot more growth, and two, there's always a problem. Like the machines are always broke. It's just like it's a factory and it's hourly workers and it's like a different environment, and it's I'm really glad that that's all we're doing because and every once in a while it's like, hey, do you want to buy this like slaughterhouse? And it's like, oof, geez. I mean, kind of, because our EBITDA would go up and like our numbers would look good. And, maybe we're controlling our destiny and that'd be better. And that's a good way to like treat our employees better or treat those types of employees better. But man, every time I look at it, it's just like, wow, that's a lot of risk. It's a lot of risk.
Makes sense. Thanks, Mike. Last question from me. It seems like you've been able to maintain this idea that this is a hobby, but are there days where you feel like it's not a hobby? And how do you reset yourself and remind yourself that it's still a hobby?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, there are days that it's like, what are we doing here? Yeah, I mean, it feels like work a lot. How do I reset myself? Yeah, I think humility is pretty important. Like ultimately, I mean, it's super fun. I'm having a great time. It's awesome. I love having employees. I love trying to make a difference in the world. Like all that stuff is wonderful. And at the end of the day, like my role as a husband and a father and a person in community and like all those things are so much more important to me. And like my first company, I lost myself. You know, I like lost who I was and who I wanted to be and my connections with others. And like I just lost that for the sake of like pleasing my investors and like doing the grind. And when it didn't work out, it was like, oh my God, like none of that matters ultimately. Like it doesn't matter. And so I feel like I have a lot better balance. I am going on a sabbatical this summer, which will be interesting. So I'm taking about 10 weeks off. And I haven't taken a break in 18 years. So that's going to be pretty fun. It's going to be hard. And I'm hoping that that's going to give me a new perspective on like how I want to interact with the company going forward. Because it is changing like with 200 people and with an executive team that's like really gelling and whatnot. I'm no longer like the conductor of the orchestra. Like I love being in a room of like 10, 15 people and it's like, what are you working on? What are you working on? You're just up knowing what every single number, everything that's moving. And I think the company is calling me to do something different now. And so, I'm up for that challenge. But yeah, they're all encompassing, especially if you raise money. But one of the most heartening things that's happened is after losing all these people's money, because we lost about $30 million of people's money. I've had every venture capitalist come up to me and be like, don't worry about it. Like, we lose money 95% of the time. Like, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, oh man, you should have said that like on the way in. Because the amount of like stress that I carried thinking that you cared if I was to like lose your money. And they're like, oh no, that's all for show. Like we're just trying to keep you motivated. It's like, oh gosh.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, good luck on the sabbatical, and thank you
Yeah.
again for sharing your story with us, Mike. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Adolfo. Susan, and we're gonna wrap.
Yeah. So Mike, thank you. Thank you so much. This was awesome. I just actually signed up for my first ButcherBox and I love all
Awesome.
the add-ons. That's awesome. And so the question we
Dollars
always
per
ask,
box.
what?
That's the dollars per box. We're trying to like
Yeah,
ramp up the
it's
dollars we
great.
make per box.
It's great. And I did notice the grain-fed thing too. It's very cool to know the background. So anyway, thank you. This was wonderful. And so a question we always have for all of our speakers is, what can we do to help you?
Oh. Well, I think our story is pretty unique. And the more that you can share with your friends and loved ones that there's a pretty cool company. We're trying to transform a big industry. We're trying to do capitalism differently. And I am willing to talk about it as well. So, if there are any places where I should be talking about this or obviously signing up and doing that is great too. That'd be really helpful.
All right, will do.
On that,
So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. On that note, Mike, thank you for this epic wisdom of beef and bootstrapping. Folks, I'm going to end the recording right now, but don't forget on March 26th, I will be presenting transformation effects and agentic AI. So please put that in your calendars. And I'm going to end the recording. Let's stick around for some overtime.